As part of this, we need to develop a more inclusive IP ecosystem that works for everyone everywhere.
بحضراتكم اليوم في فعاليات هذه الاحتفالية التي تنظمها الدولة المصرية من أجل إطلاق الاستراتيجية الوطنية للملكية الفكرية.
عنوان قمتنا وهو التنفيذ، وأتوجه إليكم اليوم مناشدا أن تكون رسائلكم إلى العالم الذي يتوقع منا الكثير رسائل واضحة.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, partners, friends. It is my great honor to welcome people from all over the world with this outstanding panelists in this session of the Solution Day on IP/AI and climate change. Before I start, I would like to share with you interesting statistics around this area of innovation, and I think you all know that the future of innovation is being driven by new emerging technologies, not just AI, but also advanced robotics and quantum computing. According to a 2018 study of McKinsey Global Institute, at least one form of innovation and AI technology could be incorporated in about 70% of companies around the world. Not only that, but AI could potentially deliver additional economic activity of $13 trillion, which is the size of the second largest economy in the world. Indeed, the discussion in COP27 showed climate change effects are hammering on the doors of our generation, a red alert for us and for future generations. That is why we will focus in our session on 3 points. 1, the nexus between encouraging innovation for green investment in the private sector, and of course startup, and decision-making in the field of sustainability, of adaptation, mitigation, and solutions in environmental transition. Number 2, how far did we achieve here in Egypt and in Africa in terms of legal framework and regulations for supporting licensing AI technologies, green liabilities, penalties for greenwashing. Number 3, the initiatives and goals of international organization. We have here the United Nations and WIPO, the UNDP and WIPO, sorry, in enhancing green investment and implementing the SDGs in this regard. Egypt recently launched its first national IP strategy. I had the honor to be with Dr. Mona and working very hard on it until it saw the light. It links to the vision of 2030, meaning that IP is highly embedded in our country for a long-term economic, social, and cultural development goals. I'll stop here, and I will invite, I would like to invite Ambassador Hisham first. I'll ask you a question. So, Ambassador Hisham, Your Excellency, the National Initiative for Green Smart Projects, we know that is an incentive to all projects that provide local innovation solutions for climate change. The question is how to make it sustainable, and number two, how to make it global.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Heba, for the invitation, and the Minister, Dr. Hala Saeed, sends her regards. First, before I get into the initiative, I just will say one word. Given this important COP27, and having worked in WIPO for many years, head of the Budget Committee, and established the Development Agenda Group, I think the importance of the balance between innovation, the copyright, and at the same time the public interest has become very critical. It's important that we find access to technology for developing countries, that climate solutions and climate technologies be disseminated to developing countries in a way in which they can be able to deal with this existential issue. We cannot talk about an existential issue where the whole world is threatened and then talk about not giving them access to technology or having to wait 20 years for them. Therefore, within WIPO, there is this exception and limitations clause in certain areas, which I plead that I can give a call from this platform in order to give more attention to this. As regards the National Initiative for Smart Green Projects, which is an initiative, a climate solution. It's a total model, unprecedented. We've tried to register it with WIPO internationally, and in Egypt we have publicized the newspaper to take the copyright for this model, not only for developing countries, by the way, but for developed countries alike, because no other country has opened the door for all of its citizens to apply for projects which are green in terms of energy saving, in terms of wind, renewable, solar, in terms of having impact, in terms of using technology, and having a resounding success. It was an invitation to the Egyptian population, and in less than 1 month we received 6,300 submissions, of which the provinces filtered them, gave us 162 successful applicants, projects. Then we picked the best with the committee headed by Dr. Mahmoud Nouhiddin, who should be coming now, and international bodies. We selected 18 projects we brought here to COP27, and they're getting financed, etc. So it's a model, it's a total SDG model. All the SDGs are within this initiative because it combines, one last minute, 30 seconds if you will. I know that you're pressed for time. In terms of sustainability, bottoms-up approach, but the most important thing, localization on the ground. We're not talking about ideas. We're talking about an implementable, already implemented initiative that has borne fruit, and we're bringing it much bigger next year, locally, internationally, through many mechanisms in Africa and through the United Nations and perhaps through WIPO cooperation in the future. Thank you, Dr. Heba.
That's very enlightening and very amazing to hear. And now, can I ask Dr. Karim Morsi, who is here with us today, on behalf of Her Excellency Minister of Environment, and Dr. Yasmin said during the conference a very interesting phrase. She said, "We are keeping the best to the last. Today, in our last day, the solution day." I would like to ask you, Dr. Karim, what are the message you would like to convey in relation to innovation and green economy that represent the government in Egypt?
Thank you so much, Dr. Heba, and thank you for inviting me on behalf of Her Excellency the Minister. Since we are today talking in the Solutions Day, so we definitely have to hit on the technology and innovation, but let me take it from a different perspective. when we're talking about technology, so we are talking about three main things. We're talking about finance, we're talking about capacity building, then we're talking about the technology transfer itself. So it's three key main pillars for implementation, or these are the implementation means. Meanwhile, I would like to emphasize that the technology shall be treated as a tool, not a product. So when we are talking about the intellectual property, we need to localize, as Ambassador Hisham has just mentioned, we need to localize the technology in order to accommodate with this problem. Because actually it is considered as a barrier unless we could transfer the technology and localize it. This is the number one. Number two, which I want to mention as well, is that the technology transfer has to be affordable. It's very good to have new technologies to cater emissions and to adapt with climate change, but the most important is how do we buy these or transfer these technologies from the developed countries to the developing countries or the emerging countries. So this is the second point that I want to mention. And last but not least, I want to say that systems has to be changed, not climate. Thank you.
The system has to be changed?
The systems itself has to be changed, not the climate change. Yeah.
That's very nice to end this answer. I agree with you in terms of transfer of technology, and definitely affordable. We had a discussion before about it, so we'll recap later. So now I would like to ask Dr. Mona Yahya, that I'm extremely blessed to have worked with her for days and nights through a year, just to have the strategy of the IP strategy for Egypt. Dr. Mona, to what extent the Egyptian patent system is complying with international standards? That's my first question. What message, as the head of the Egyptian Patent Office, in terms of goals and visions, do you have to convey? And do you have a way for evaluating novel green technology? And maybe I'll leave this question till the end because I have one of my panelists who would like to raise it.
شكرا دكتور هبة. خلوني أتكلم بالعربي. أولا إحنا مكتب رائد الاختراع جمهورية مصر العربية عضو في المنظمة العالمية للملكية الفكرية، فإحنا بنشتغل على الستاندرد بتاعة المعايير الدولية اللي موجودة في المنظمة العالمية للملكية الفكرية. فإحنا دكتور هبة ده المكتب المصري ماشي على المعايير الدولية. بالنسبة للمبادرات اللي المكتب واخدها لمنظومة التكنولوجيا الخضراء، مكتب رائد الاختراع عنده المبادرة دي ان احنا بنساعد على تسريع الاجراءات للطلبات المقدمة في مجال التكنولوجيا الخضراء. المبادرة ديت كمان بتربط ما بين الحقوق الملكية الفكرية والتكنولوجيا الخضراء واهداف التنمية المستدامة، واصلا بنساعد المخترعين اللي بيشتغلوا في هذا الصدد. وانا كنت سعيده الصبح وانا بمر في المعرض اني انا شفت نماذج حاصله على براءات اختراع من مكتب براءات الاختراع المصري، وبدات ان المبادره ان المنتجات بتاعتهم تكون موجوده فعلا في السوق، وهم واخدين براءات لجرين سوليوشنز وليه حلول تكنولوجيه خضراء ذكيه موجوده هنا. ومعانا كمان في المتحدثين صاحب شركه برضو عنده حل تكنولوجي وقدم لمكتب براءات الاختراع. فاحنا عندنا مبادرات كتير لمساعده ده. بس انا بايد كلام معالي السفير هشام بدر انه بيتكلم ان احنا ولغايه دلوقتي احنا الحلول اكثر موجوده في الخارج ليست موجوده داخل جمهوريه مصر العربيه، وعشان نعمل نقل للتكنولوجيا ده بيبقى مكلف جدا، فاحنا لازم نبدا حوار مع المنظمه العالميه للملكيه الفكريه على اتاحه استخدام التكنولوجيات الخضراء بطريقه مبسطه زي ما اشتغلنا قبل كده على اتاحه الدواء، وده تم بعد مناقشات عديده. شكرا دكتوره هبه. مش
I have Victor next to you. شكرا جزيلا يا دكتوره منى. انا بتشرف ان معانا الدكتور محمود محي الدين، واحب ان انا I leave the floor to Dr. محمود محي الدين, the UN climate change champion for Egypt and the brain behind many initiatives that have been taking place since the COP27 and maybe a little bit prior to that. And in particular, a very unique national initiative for green smart projects that has been launched in all 27 governorates in Egypt.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Heba, for the kind invitation. It's a great honor for me to join this panel. And in my way here, I had an update on their contributions in different aspects related to climate action, to intellectual property rights, and how to translate ideas into action. I don't know if Ambassador Betty spoke already or not. He did. All right, so great. Fantastic. So, yeah, so this is an example of these areas of tension and no tension around patents, about ideas, how to protect them and how to avail them. So the idea itself that was embraced by the government, by the head of the state, the whole thing is happening now under the auspices of the president of Egypt, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The whole partnership with different government ministers and ministries, civil ministers, 27 governorate and partnerships. So this idea we're availing it for repetition, for regional consumption, and for global utilization. So we are not very much protective of it, and actually we're encouraging taking it from that platform. But perhaps we need to go back to some of the origins, give credit to the origin of the idea. Some people say, well, we have some logos, we have some ideas on the platform, that could really be protected. But what should really be protected is basically the ideas on the 6 areas of work that the ambassador mentioned, from them being mega projects to the micro ones. These need to be protected, they need to be supported, because elements of their value going forward, and when they are going to be realizing the market value, is all about how they are going to be patented, how they are going to be able to get the idea, because they don't have much of capital. It's basically about ideas more than anything else. For those of you who studied economics, you may have told the wrong thing, like economics is about getting a bit of labor with a bit of land and some capital, and then we have an entrepreneur. Now, the new way of learning economics is basically about 3 things: about people, ideas, and other matters. These other matters could be anything, from capital to land to logistics, but it's about people and ideas. How to protect the ideas and how to support people with innovative solutions going forward. For the solutions to be very local, actually all of the inventions, all of the developments started local, but they were facilitated by a platform. I have 3 things to say on that. First, on how to get climate action supported by ideas and by inventions, innovation, and by development of projects at local scale. So this requires more investments in research and development, and in discussions that we had with the Minister of Higher Education, he's responsible as well for the investments in research and development. We established a network of university professors, of academia, and for research centers from the country and beyond, because we are taking this to regional dimensions, African and Arab dimensions, given as well that COP28 is going to be hosted in an Arab country. So the first thing is to take matters related to investments in R&D in this. Second part, which is very much important, about behavioral change. And this is one of the constraints on work that we need to be revising, and how to promote climate action through better ideas going forward, especially in the world, globally, 51% only in the world population based on some surveys consider that climate is a threat and they need to have actions against this war. But at the same time, in our countries, how many, of course, I assume that everybody in this room is aware of the dangers of climate action, of climate change. That's why you have action against it. But in our country, the figure had improved to 35% awareness. It was much worse than that, close to 40%. So through your work and perhaps through development of knowledge-sharing platforms, that's why some, and don't belittle or don't undermine the source of knowledge where it comes from, because we have 7 children coming from around the world, including an Egyptian, a Colombian, someone from Dominican, from Armenia, from Australia, Ghana, giving us ideas about promoting knowledge on climate action, how to protect ourselves in it, with solutions when it comes to mitigation, adaptation, and now it's full of ideas when it comes to loss and damage. The final point is basic about finance and investments. Where I was on a panel just now about issues related to financial inclusion and access to finance, because all of these ideas would require funding, adequate funding, otherwise they will be ending into frustration. You have the idea, you have the experiment, you have seen some scale, you are just working in some small district, but you need to take it at scale. How can you do that? There are many means of doing this through the banking system, through the capital market, but now with venture capitalists, there is a growing role for them. But all of them need to be funded by adequate finance, including the finance that should be coming from the multilateral development system. If you were in the blue zone, everybody's talking about the 100 billion and how they were not delivered. Now we have an idea. I don't like it actually to be patented or protected, because I need it to be spreading beyond this room and this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's basically to get the existing multilateral development finance system, including the big ones like the World Bank or the smaller ones like the Green Climate Fund, to do the following. Give finance for climate at concessional terms, 10 years grace, add to that 20 years of maturity to be collectively around 30 years. But the important thing, how much you'll charge for it. Because many of these institutions really charge, if you add everything, it could be up to 4 or 5%. With exchange rate in dollar vulnerability or variability, that is getting many countries at risk now. So it should be flat rate for 1%, no more. That can really enhance financial inclusion. That could support more concessional finance for adaptation and mitigation. And that can really make a better world than the one that we are living in. And here, this solution is very simple, but it's missing something, which is basically behavioral change and leadership that would require your communication and support. Because you may have the solutions in inventions, the hard power is there, but the soft power needs really to be enhanced in order to get matters done. Having said that, I'm very grateful to the opportunity. I hope to see some outcomes from your discussion that can help us going forward. This needs some sort of flexibility, where to use patents and property rights. Examples in fighting disease, like most recently in COVID, you need to avail the opportunities for all. In some other matters that are not really to do with public goods or public bads, you need really to protect them better in order to maximize value. So some sort of good awareness as well on where to use patents and property rights and when not to be restrictive about them. It needs very much advanced knowledge and good awareness. Having said that, all the best in your discussions and your recommendations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this kind of insights and for the very deep analysis that you just drafted in a few minutes. As usual, impressive. And I would like to now move from the government to the international institutions. And I will start by Victor, who's representing the WIPO. And my question to you is how WIPO sees the IP/AI innovation as a fundamental component for the innovation technology, And what is the role for incentivize the R&D investment and, of course, funding upstream? Could you please also, through this, and what is new for the new methodology adopted? I know that you're using the global index, innovation index, sorry, to rank different economies. So my question is, why some key performers, according to this index in climate, tech, green innovation, perform much, much better than a country like Egypt or developing countries?
Thank you so much, Dr. Heba. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be in this panel with these distinguished panelists and to give the perspective of the World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva. And to address your first question of what WIPO thinks about the relationship between IP and innovation, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone here in the room that WIPO very much strongly believes that IP is a fundamental tool for fostering innovation. And for the simple reason that IP helps innovators to capture and to create value. And just how much value are we talking about here? To give you a sense, the global value of intangible assets in 2021, and this includes intellectual property related assets such as patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, designs, etc., data also. IP therefore should be seen as much more than a set of legal tools. IP, in fact, are powerful catalysts for creating jobs, for attracting investments, and ultimately for economic, social, and cultural development. And this is why for WIPO, under the leadership of our new Director General, Darren Tang, our vision is quite simply a world where innovation and creativity from anywhere is supported by IP for the benefit of everyone. As regards the comparative look, I'll be very quick here. As regards the comparative look between developing and developing countries in relation to innovation, WIPO, of course, ranks 132 economies based on a set of around 80 indicators through our Global Innovation Index. This certainly isn't an easy exercise to collect data in a consistent and systematic manner from all of these countries, but we've been doing so for the last 15 years, and the Global Innovation Index has established itself as the premier tool for measuring innovation. And in 2022, the top 5 economies, and I'll list them in the order of their ranking, were Switzerland, the United States, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and Netherlands. So these were the top 5 innovation performers. And I might hear you asking, what do these economies have in common? And I would argue here that each of these has a very strong IP culture in place where innovators and consumers alike make very deliberate decisions to both protect and to respect intellectual property. But it's important to emphasize that this has not happened overnight. This culture has been developed over quite some time. Centuries for some and decades for others. And in terms of, to give you also comparative analysis, where Egypt, for instance, ranks in the Global Innovation Index in 2022, Egypt came in at number 89. And this was 5 positions higher than the 2021 ranking. But I think more interestingly is that Egypt ranks 14 amongst the 36 middle-income group of countries. Egypt also performs very well in relation to venture capital received, having pulled in $600 million US in 2021, and this gave Egypt a very strong performance, coming in at number 34 out of 193 countries. And Egypt also performs very well in producing more innovation output relative to investments. And just earlier, before I came into this room, there's a very impressive exhibition to the left on, I believe, future generations and innovators that was focusing on Egyptian innovation and Egyptian brands and Egyptian products. And this, I guess, is a very good demonstration of this. And aside from the GII, and you mentioned this, and I'll be closing with this, is the important news that Egypt last month very impressively launched its first national intellectual property strategy. And this strategy links directly to Vision 2030. And the IP strategy, of course, was launched under the leadership of the Intellectual Property Office, the President, the Prime Minister, and very many government ministers who were there. And this strategy, quite frankly, demonstrates the role that intellectual property can play in the realization of Egypt's development objectives and Egypt's desire to catalyze growth for jobs and for developing a future knowledge economy. So, in conclusion, IP is fundamental to fostering innovation.
Thank you so much, Victor. Yes, indeed, the IP strategy, we are very proud of it. As I mentioned before, we worked as ERRADA days and nights for it to see the light, with other, of course, team from the government. Talking about the government, I will introduce Dr. Bayoumi, who actually was the first one that I asked help, I seeked help when I was giving a presentation for the Prime Minister in relation to the green incentives and how to promote green incentives or promote green businesses. And Dr. Bayoumi, as a representative of the UNDP, was the first one to help and give me a very good background. Could you please tell us the role of the UNDP to deploy innovation and AI to support climate change, and in particular, I know that you work on this project, which is energy transition in Egypt, with example if you have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Heba, for inviting me to be with this distinguished panelists. It's a pleasure to be here today. In fact, actually, the UNDP, unfortunately, is not an agency that's mandated to develop technologies. It's believed that technology is going to be the critical factor in fighting climate change. And this goes for both mitigation and adaptation. It happened that over the last 10-15 years, the mobilization of the COP and the world leaders put more emphasis on moving the technologies for mitigation than adaptation. And I have to admit that this has led to improved technologies and technologies that were able to mature and really makes shows the light at the end of the tunnel that really carbon neutrality can be achieved. To give you an example from Egypt, we have been working on the development of the market transformation to energy efficient lighting systems, known as LED, and Egypt has really a big success story in the transformation of the lighting system to LED over a very short period of time. This project was implemented between the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy with the UNDP. And I can tell you briefly that we had over 200...
Yes, please.
200 million lamps entered the market in Egypt over the last few years, and this has led to a significant reduction in electricity consumption that amounts between 10 to 15% of total electricity consumption. This is huge. I'm talking here about real energy transition. We're not talking about one big project here or one project there. And the motivation for this transformation that happened was the decrease in the prices. The decrease in the prices was related to innovation and technology that came new, that was pushed by policies actually developed mainly in Europe, that they set targets for phasing out the traditional lamp, pushed the developers to put more effort into developing technology and companies to produce products that are cheaper, moving factories to the east in order to generate cheap technology. Another example that we're working on right now is the rooftop PV systems, the photovoltaic solar panels that can generate electricity and at a cheap rate, and over a period of maybe 10 years, we have seen a sharp drop in the prices of this technology globally by 90%. That led, to the fact that we have the cheapest source of electricity today on Earth is from the solar panels. Between the solar panels and the LED, I can give you an example from Sharm el-Sheikh over here. Hotels that have converted to LED at the beginning, they reduced their consumption between 25 to 30% of the total electricity consumption by just changing the lighting system. And now they are working today with these hotels, and a significant number of these hotels have started to install the PV panels, the rooftop PV panels. They are able to reduce between 25 to 30% additional electricity just being produced from this solar panels. So in total, in few years' time, these hotels were able to reduce their consumption between 50 to 60%. This is what we're talking about as energy transition, and this is what the world is hoping to go into over the coming years. And this is based mainly on innovation and improving the technologies that we're able to reduce the cost and make it creating the business opportunity to invest in this renewable energy technologies and energy efficiencies, which is going to be, as I mentioned, a critical factor for fighting climate change. Similarly, we need to find ways for improving the innovation and technologies for climate change adaptation, which unfortunately is not the case. And this is obvious, for obvious reason, this is not the matter of importance for the developed countries to invest in adaptation technologies. This is the matter of developed countries to look for these technologies. So unless we're able to develop these technologies and find low-cost technologies for protection of coastal zones from sea level rise, or smart agricultural systems that are cost-effective, or alternative water resources, the developing countries are going to be in difficult situation facing the impacts of climate change.
Thank you so much. That's very important. Thank you so much, Dr. Bayoumi. Dr. Bishara, CEO of Masad. From your experience as a consultant for environmental and energy services, we had a discussion earlier, I think today or yesterday, I really can't recall, about how can that innovation needs large investment. And we were talking about the role of the regulators. So do you think regulators should be aware of the fact that some innovation could be actually damaging for the environment and not the other way around? That's my first question. So what are your views suggesting? Do you suggest, if the answer is yes, do you suggest that we have to have an ex-ante? And for those who does not understand ex-ante, which is a legal term which means prior to assessment before the legislation is drafted, and while it is drafted and before it is approved and inaugurated?
Thank you, Dr. Heba. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Your question sounds, if I take it, sounds idealistic, that we should do an assessment of inventions and exclude or refuse some of them based on a certain criteria. But I will echo what Victor said earlier, that it's monumental, ideas are monumental for business growth and for innovation. And I'm afraid if this happens, that we're introducing a new barrier to innovation. So I think we should differentiate roles and responsibilities. So patenting and assessing the innovative idea should be left within this boundary to allow more innovation. Because I'll tell you an example, you never know at the beginning, our criteria could be wrong. The innovation now could lead to another innovation. So I think we should leave the market and the regulations to come after the patent and the innovation is launched, to control what will happen with it. If people refuse to use it, if regulations that do not allow to use it, this is another story.
To differentiate between the operator and regulator.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bishop. Dr. Amr. Dr. Amr is a co-founder and a driving force behind Shift. Shift is a startup for e-vehicles, cars, which I actually was in one of it earlier today. And I would like to ask you from your experience, because I mean, it takes us a long way when you were starting the idea and starting to have all the licenses and approvals. So from your experience, while trying to set up your startup, to what extent does IP, I know your relationship with Dr. Mona, that's why she's smiling, does IP, right protection and innovation matter? And my question, are you patent? Thank you.
Okay, thank you first of all for all the efforts you've done on creating this new framework for intellectual property, the national one through ERRADA. I also would like to thank Dr. Mona and the Egyptian Patent Office, because the big part of the effort we've succeeded in doing regarding intellectual property was due to the expertise Dr. Mona specifically had, the personal expertise she had and the help she gave to us. I'd like to organize my answer in a set of groups. Patenting definitely is a driving force for innovation, definitely a driving force for growth. But the way we dealt with it in the past 2 years, creating our own startup, as a startup, we had very limited resources, both in terms of real, like human resources and financial as well. So if you look at the way the intellectual property system is working worldwide, you have a given set of possible protection schemas. The way we felt while we were going through these processes or all the options that are available was that this system is a little bit more in favor of bigger players. And I've had the personal experience back at the time when I worked at Intel in 2010 that I can go back to and recall if we have time. But the reason behind my thoughts are, first of all, it's very expensive to create that. For a startup, sometimes we cannot afford this in terms of money. And it's not just the money. As a startup, the human resources and time that we have to put behind this is big. The difference of lawyer selection, if the lawyer changes a word, it puts us in a completely different position of protection. So that's the first thing. The cost, the timing it takes, actually, all the process takes around 1 year provisional, then another year to actually get a permanent intellectual patent, for example, and then during the provision, you might find that there's someone else who has something very close to what you're doing elsewhere in the world, and you get to revoke your intellectual property. Now, the third thing that I would like to bring up, and I think this is what's relevant to our discussion about green intellectual property. The objective of green intellectual property, or green technologies in general, is to disrupt the status quo that we have. This is exactly what startups are there to do. This is what innovation is there to do. So if we are going to evaluate these critical key technologies that would save us, that would save the planet and the environment, with the same way that we actually evaluate other technologies, the novelty margin, the novelty evaluation sometimes is going to put these technologies in a situation where they're not allowed to actually protect their technology. So I think these are the three main things that I'd like to cover. So as a result of this, I think we need a new framework, a new type of intellectual property, a new class of assets of IP that would be there for small emerging markets, new developing technologies that would allow them to actually protect this intellectual property. And one last point regarding this experience that I had in 2010, we're seeing now the rollable screens, the foldable screens around in phones and everything. I remember back at the time we started working with this at Intel, and then we realized that all of the OEMs just decided to wait till the patent of the owner actually expired so that they can actually use it. So I think what I would like to advocate for on this panel is let's create a different type of intellectual property that would allow disruptive green technologies to be protected, to create value for these startups that come up with this disruptive technology.
That's exactly, thank you so much, Dr. Ab, and that's exactly was my point or my trigger when I started to think about the subject of this panel, is how ERRADA can help, and of course with the government in Egypt, of course with the stakeholders and expertise, international organization, how can we raise the standard and how can we help in terms of regulation to be innovative as well, not only to analyze innovation. So thank you so much. And now we move to Mrs. the head of Sweden Electric Foundation Sustainability Chief Officer. She has two hats.
Achieve the Paris Agreement, then they should be released if it is something innovative. Example, carbon capture. It's a very expensive technology. There's only Mitsubishi, I think, they're the leader in this. And there is a startup in Canada, and they're really yes, we're working with them. We're looking into Arizona State University. They're huge in innovation and sustainability, and their business card says we're #1 before MIT. So it's a very creative thing. They're very innovative, so we're looking into this. On the foundation side, we have vocational schools, and in our school we teach the students, the technicians or the apprentices, as we like to call them. We teach them about sustainability from the get-go. We have traveled with a lot of the students. They have created their own apps or startups, and we've just won a global award from CERN. Yes, thank you. And as well, we support high school students in a lot of their projects. And we even acquire, in some cases, some of the projects, like we acquired Solera, for example. They have a very innovative solution. We invest in certain things for climate meditation. We try as much as possible to support as well entrepreneurs in Africa. We have a footprint in Africa, so we work there, and our mega project, which will be available on the App Store in December, we have created an application. It's called the Green Penguin, and it will be translated to more than 20 languages. It is an application with has games for children. We were showcasing it in the UN Global Compact to teach kids and individuals about carbon emission and how they can improve it. And it will as well roll next year with the Norwegian fund. It will roll commercially in industry, so it can help the industry sector to monitor their climate footprint.
My questions to you, thank you so much. My question to you is very sneaky because I know the answers and I know how successful and how responsive Sweden is. But I wanted also the audience to hear, and of course, to hear about it. Thank you so much, Mrs. Manay, and thank you everyone on the panel. And maybe would you like to, Dr. Amuna, to add something, because a lot of the questions has to do with the patent office.
شكرا دكتور هبه. اكيد في اسئله كتير بتدور في ذهن كل اللي قاعدين على موضوع براءة الاختراع، ولان براءة الاختراع دي حاجه مكلفه جدا ومحتاجه شغل كتير، فاحنا دايما بنتكلم على ان احنا بنعلم الشركات المتوسطه والصغيره انها تستخدم نظام نماذج المنفعه، لان ده اقل، هو بيدي حمايه لمده اقل، بس ده يقدر يساعده ان هو ما يدفعش فلوس كتير. كمان بنحمسهم على انهم يستخدموا التريد سيكريت، ان هم يستخدموا الاسرار التجاريه في حمايه الملكيه الفكريه ليهم، لان ده ما بيحتاجش انه يدفع مصروفات وبيقدر يحتفظ بالسر لفتره، لان في الغالب زي ما قال دكتور عمرو، قال ان الموضوع مكلف وبياخد وقت طويل، لكن
بروسيجرز طويل
بالظبط، لكن البروسيجر بتبقى اقل. التريد سيكريت ما بيحتاجش بروسيجر اصلا، هو بيحتفظ بيه لغايه ما طلع، لان الموضوع بيبقى بسيط، التكنولوجي بيبقى بسيط.